Welcome to From Head to Heart and Home. We're excited to have you listen in on our conversation. We are a channel created by women, empowering women to take inspired action to create the life they want. With your hosts, Shanda Ceretti, certified transformational coach, and myself, Carla Center, relationship coach. So today we're going to talk about paving the way to compassion. This is about the tiny humans we are and the tiny humans those that we interact with are and how to have compassion for them. And I'm going to let Shanda kind of start us out. And this is going to be such a juicy topic. I can't wait to hear what we come up with.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. So I feel like okay, so we needed to stop talking about this and press record, right? We were like, hang on, this is some good stuff coming up. So what we're talking about here is kind of like how Carla introduced it. So we all have had situations in our lives where we have felt like someone has done us wrong, right? Someone has done something to us that has hurt or felt wrong, and whether it was or wasn't is regardless, it's our feeling about it that is the important piece here. So what I'm getting at here, without dancing around, and I'm just going to come out and say it, is a time when we felt like a victim, right? And when we feel like a victim, it means that there is a perpetrator, someone who has done us wrong on the other side, right? And so I think, first of all, what is important here and what we want to kind of mirror back to everybody is that one of the flags into understanding when our patterns are coming up, right? Because when we've all had these experiences, we then have patterns that emerge over and over and over, right? Until they're healed. And so the easiest way to understand when that is happening is that anytime we actually feel hurt, we need to kind of check in and be like, am I hurting because of something that's happening right now would be the first step, or is this a reaction and it's reminding me of something that's already happened in the past, right? So am I reacting in the present moment, or is this to something that's already happened? Okay. And so to take it that step further, when we talk about the tiny humans that we all are and have been, this is a kind of gateway into having compassion, developing compassion, even exploring the idea of that being a possibility. Because for some people at the beginning, it is like absolutely not. And I remember being there. But having compassion for those people we feel like have done us wrong in whatever way that might be, physically, mentally, emotionally, right? Spiritually. And it's learning to see them as their tiny selves, as their, 2-year old, 3-year old, 5-year old self, so that we can step into that possibility of having compassion for them and their experiences and not making it about us and how we're hurting and how we're in pain, because that just keeps perpetuating that pain over and over and over. So it's kind of the web that we're getting into today, and we're going to kind of work at untangling this a little bit for you. So Carla, go ahead. What do you have to add to this?
And so we were talking about prior to hitting record that when we sit down and we look at how somebody is acting, and if we let go of the we're the victim, if we look at it as if somebody has had their own trauma, um, they have felt the victim, they create these patterns of their own, these coping mechanisms to move forward, and we unintentionally step into those.
Mm,
Our parents, if we feel like our parents have really victimized us, if we take a look at what life was probably like for them as tiny humans, not to give them excuses, let me be very clear. We're not
mm,
trying to say to give anybody excuses. We're trying to say to have compassion for somebody so that you can understand it allows you to release that energy of being the victim of someone's actions
right.
and to have understanding, compassion. Stuff gets passed down generation to generation.
Mhm.
And we get to say, not me. I choose not to, like we talk about often. It's a choice.
Right.
And if you just step and look from the outside on stuff when you feel very inside, it makes so much more sense because we only see this little picture. Our perception is
Mhm.
so small if we really think about the big picture of what's going on. And that small picture is what keeps us stuck in things in our lives because we're in the pain, we're in the anger, we're in the frustration, and we can't see there is so much more to what's going on than what we see at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the compassion that we are talking about here, like you were saying, Carla, is like the compassion is the healing part, right? The compassion is how we come from love, not fear. When we're in victim, we're coming from fear. There's no healing in there. We have to come from love. So when we choose compassion over fear or anger, we're already getting ourselves into this healing state. And it's how you move on, it's how you move forward,
Right.
regardless of how that other person um, chooses to or like whatever choices they make or whatever actions they decide to take moving forward. It doesn't matter, right?
Right.
It's for you. It's like forgiveness, right? We used to hear a lot about forgiveness and how forgiveness is for you, not the other person, right? Necessarily, because that's where that healing starts, right? It's about you letting go. We're letting go of the story that is tormenting us, right?
Right.
And so, like you were saying to Carla before we hit record, I don't know if you brought it up again here, but how people act and have acted is not about us, it's about them. And it says and shows so much about them. And something that I always go back to when I get like slip into maybe a negative mindset or thought over someone or towards someone is it's the question of like what must have happened to that person for them to act that way or to treat someone that way. Like if I see someone and maybe I'm not agreeing with how they're treating someone else, I ask myself that question to slip into compassion. And again, like you said, not to condone what they're doing or what actions they're taking, but to say, wow, like, what's your story? What
Mhm.
happened to you to create um this way of being towards others, right? And it's important to understand also that they're acting out their own victimhood, right? Their own trauma response onto you or through you. You're simply like a talisman, right? Like you're the receiver of their trauma response. And again, this is where that generational trauma comes from. And I love that you brought that up because we get to choose, am I going to keep passing this down or does this thing stop with me? And that is a big choice to make because I say this with so much love, it takes work. It takes
Yeah.
discomfort. It takes vulnerability and it takes a willingness to like get it wrong, mess it up, fumble, but keep trying, right? It takes that commitment. I remember when um, there was a relationship in my life where I couldn't be with this person anymore. And it wasn't a romantic relationship, it was actually someone in my family, and I couldn't have them in my life anymore. It was too toxic. So I made the choice to create space, right? And I didn't know how long that was going to take. And I've talked about this in the past, but and I had so many people reach out to me with their, displeasure of how my like what choices I was making around this. But I knew at the end of the day, even when I felt guilt and what have you come and go, I knew at the end of the day the choice was right for me, right? That I needed this to move forward. But I had to wake up every single day and I had to reassure myself this is the right choice for me right now. This is the right choice for me right now every day until eventually it might have been like every other day. And then it was maybe once a week. And then it got less and less, right? So it's the same thing when we talk about like developing compassion for someone or forgiveness, right? It's a choice you have to make constantly until you don't have to make it constantly anymore.
Right. Beautiful. And for those that you do keep in your life, to stop and look at what is your, not to look at just their behavior, because we're very good at that. You did this to me. What is my part in it? What part do I play in this pattern and what can I change to not be part of it? I can't
Mhm.
change somebody else. That is their choice. Like Shanda just said, it's somebody else's choice. And we're not here to change somebody else. We're here to not be part of their patterns, to
Mm.
go, hey, I play a part in this. So what am I doing? What is, just look at the pattern, pull out the emotion of it, as an observer, what's the pattern that happens between me and them, me and the group? What is my part in it? Because I can change that. What can I do differently instead of going, they did this to me, this happened to me, and then we stay in those emotions.
Mm.
And then it will just, if you look at it honest, you're like, you'll be like, oh my gosh, there really is a pattern. Multiple things that have happened, they seem a little bit different, but really it's a pattern and we play our part in it.
Right.
And that's where the aha is. You're like, I didn't realize I did that.
Yeah.
What if I made a different choice? And it can get messy, like Shanda said, but what if I made a different choice?
Yeah.
That's the reason for space, because sometimes you can't see your patterns if you don't give space, because the
Yeah.
emotions are so intense, the
Mm.
thoughts are so intense that you have to step back and take space. And people will throw stuff at you. How dare you? The guilt, the shame, all of the things are very, very real. But if you allow yourself to be like, okay, that's theirs, whatever they're throwing at me is not mine. That's theirs. And I have a reason for this because I would like peace. And if it's possible to have a good relationship with that person, the only way I'm going to do so is to step back and take a
Mhm.
look at it and to see my part in the patterns, because we can't change anybody. We we believe if we love somebody enough, if we do this, which is, by the way, using love as a manipulation, is not really love.
Right.
If I love you enough, you wouldn't do this to me.
Hmm.
Right. And so if we step back, it's such a beautiful thing, but we have made it in our culture like you have to, you're obligated to have
Hmm.
this relationship with someone. And so we feel that because people will mirror that back to us. If that's our belief that we're not a good person if we take a step back from somebody, then we will definitely have people who say those things to us because that's what we believe is coming for us.
Right. And we're always looking for that evidence and proof, so we will find it, right?
Yes.
One way or another. Yeah. And when you're talking about like not being able to change people, 100%, the only person that we can change is ourselves. And that in itself is work, right?
Yes,
So
it is.
imagine trying to change someone else. Like that is just the impossible feat. So the only thing that we can do around gaining different perspective, I guess, or a different experience by gaining a different experience on how other people are showing up in our lives, right? We're like, I want to change this person. Why can't this person change? It's not them who need to change. It's us and our thoughts. We need to change our thoughts about them and our thoughts about the situation because it's the thoughts that are creating the discomfort, right? And that's creating the grief, is what I call it. Now, obviously, if somebody's physically harming you, that's a different story here.
Right.
It, it's a little bit different. So we're not talking about that. But what we're talking about here is when you have that, like, why can't this person just change or be different? It's like, why do we show up surprised when they show up the way we know they're going to show up? Why do we act like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they did that? And it's like, well, that's what they've always done. So why is that such a shocker? Right. So we need to begin to wrap our brain around the idea of changing our thoughts about that person rather than trying to change them, because that's how it works, right? We like to try and externalize the things, but it's not. It's everything is within, right? And so it's like think looking at a situation where there might be some sort of like altercation or discomfort or whatever there is, right? And asking yourself, like you were saying, Carla, how are you contributing, right? How am I showing up? Like, what is my way of being? How am I approaching this situation that's creating more of this discomfort, more of this pain, more of this grief or sadness, whatever it is? How can I show up differently to create different results, right? So, choosing a different approach will create a different result, right? So it's like, don't get stuck in the way of doing things. And it's like, well, this is what I've always done, and or this is who I am. And it's like, okay, well, what if you try something different? Because that's only ever generated the results that you've experienced up until now. What if there was a different way? And this is something that I'm constantly working on with my clients, right? I see this time and time again. And it's like It never gets old. Where when they choose to show up differently, right? They come choose to show up from love as opposed to come from fear. Everything changes, and the other people don't change a thing, right? It's almost like we lift the vibration and we bring those along with us who can come with us,
Right.
right? So it's like we do the work and everybody benefits from it. And we create a whole new dynamic within those family systems or friendships or colleagues or business relationships, whatever they are. We shift the relationships because we're willing to shift within ourselves.
Right. Beautifully said. And if you just take a look at the fact that you play a part, like I was talking before we were recording about triangulation, which happens many times, especially a lot of women do the triangulation. If you stepped back, whatever the person's reason, it could be the fact maybe as a child they were ignored, and that was the only way they got attention was to have people that they are the hero, and then they have people arguing. But what if you stepped back and you're like, this isn't about me, I'm going to change my behavior, I'm going to elevate my frequency and see what happens. Well, that you took out the third person in that, and that person has to figure out another way to communicate with you because you've chosen not to communicate that way, right? And
Mm,
maybe they won't communicate with you, who knows what their choices will be, but it doesn't really matter. But you took yourself out of that and made a choice to have healthier communication with people, to no longer play the game of it of I talk about you, you talk about me, we play that game. I've taken myself out because that's not how I want my life to be. I don't enjoy it. I don't like the feeling of it because there's a frequency to that. I decided not to be better than you, but to choose what feels better for me
yeah.
and then raise myself up. And the communication gets so much more clear when you're like, okay, their stuff's not about me. So then
Yeah.
I don't pull in whatever emotion that used to trigger me. What was my
Mm.
reaction? I can go, okay, that didn't feel good, but their stuff was about them. That tiny little human is doing whatever their thing is. What's my tiny human going to do?
Yeah. 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 And I think it's really interesting too, because we learn about ourselves through other people. Now, I'm not
Yes.
saying when someone's like, you're this and you're that and that kind of thing, that's not how we learn about ourselves, but we learn about ourselves through how people show up in our lives, right? We're always learning and we learn through doing. So we learn through relating to people, through conversing with people and interacting with other people. That's how we learn about us because it's so hard sometimes to see ourselves from a neutral standpoint, a neutral perspective. Like we have a bias of who we are, right? Because it's like who we were or who we want to be or who we think we should be, right? So we have all these different like dossiers of like files and like ways of being, and we kind of just put them all together and we are what we are in any given moment. But really starting to pay attention to how people in your life are showing up towards you, right? Like if you have a lot of support from friends and family, you're probably a very caring and giving person, right? And they feel safe around you, they enjoy your company and that sort of thing, right? So it's showing you, it's almost mirroring back to you what your strengths are, but also what your
Mhm.
weaknesses are. And weaknesses are not something to like begrudge or feel bad about or make yourself wrong for. These are opportunities for growth. This is where the
Yes.
real magic is, right? And again, whenever we have those negative thoughts or those negative feelings towards someone else, like you were saying, again, going back to the tiny human, we'll call it like the tiny human effect, right? Is like seeing those people as their small versions, as their 2 year old, 5 year old self. We would never treat, a young child in a nasty negative way and kind of, play the victim with a child. That's just not
Right.
typically how it is, right? We want to protect and love and nurture. And by the way, This is a really important exercise for yourself too. When you find yourself beating on yourself and getting so hard on yourself and wearing yourself down, this is when you need to have self-compassion. And sometimes it can help to see yourself as that younger you, right? To allow yourself to have that acceptance and that forgiveness for yourself. Because likely, as always, if you don't have or can't have it for someone else, it's because you haven't yet given it to yourself. So it has to start with you. It has to come from within in order to be able to shine it out.
Beautifully said. And it changes the glasses that we have on when we come from that perspective.
Hmm.
Um, it just allows us to give more space to other people as well as ourselves. And if we are feeling judged by many people, like Shanda just said, we need to look inward. Are we judging ourselves? It starts with us
Yeah.
always.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to share?
No, I think the last thing that I'll just say again, and we've mentioned it a few times here, but is really just if you could see your life and everything that's happening around you as mirrors. Like you know that those mirror rooms that you used to find at like circuses or fairs that you go into
The
this
fun
room.
house.
Yeah, there you go. And there'd be mirrors all the way around you. Pretend that that is life. So you might see Aunt Betty over here or Uncle Joe over there or ex best friend Sally over here. But what are we actually seeing? We're seeing a mirror of something from within us. Okay.
Right.
That sure, it might be acted out through this person, but what can we learn about us through that person, through that experience, through that circumstance?
Right. And that takes the emotion out of it, and it helps you to learn and grow so much
Right.
when you do things that way, because then we're not in like, what did they do to us? We're like, okay, what can I learn from this?
Yeah.
Because I can't change somebody else's actions or reactions, but I can take a look at what's going on within me.
Right. Yeah. Beautiful. Love it.
Beautiful. So just remember that all the power goes with you, like we talked about last week. You get to empower yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have not subscribed, I suggest you subscribe. We always have great conversations. If there's somebody who could benefit from our conversation, please share with them. That's what we're here to do, is to really make an impact on everybody's lives. And next week we'll have another juicy conversation as always. So for now, bye.